The Food and Drug Administration has approved Pfizer's COVID-19 bivalent vaccine for minors aged 12 and up.
COVID-19 vaccines may soon be commercially available in the Philippines.
There are more opportunities that doctors, clinicians, no, sa mga hospital, they can already purchase it and give this to this population.
It cannot go to the ordinary drugstore. They must be supplied to pharmacies that have the freezer. So ganun ang mangyayari. We'll still call on the private sector to help distribute the vaccine.
A lot of developments in the country's healthcare sector. There's the approval of the Certificate of Product Registration or CPR for Pfizer's bivalent jabs. This means the vaccines will now be available commercially. Now, there's also the new health secretary's campaigns, which include tapping underboard nurses for tenured hospital duty. What do stakeholders in the health industry think about all of these things? Let's discuss in this edition of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin ngayon dito sa studio sa Mandaluyong. Ed Lingao of One News, Lucy Cruz Valdez, Head of News 5. Chiefs, good evening.
Evening.
O yung bivalent, pinag-uusapan na natin yun eh. Di ba? Parang, now that it's available commercially, what will that mean? Kasi kanina sinabi rin ni Dr. Ted Elbosa dun sa intro natin. It doesn't mean na nasa
Kahit
kung ano-anong
saan.
drugstore yan. Meron ding mga lugar na designated. In particular, among other things, yung may refrigeration and so...
Marami ng vaccines na ganun eh. Na you can't buy them over the counter. You have to go to a hospital, to a clinic, and certain
Dapat
places.
i-administer na.
Tsaka reseta. Or kailangan pa ba ng reseta? Do we just assume that everybody needs this?
That we don't know yet. That they'll have to come up with first eh. Pero yun nga. Marami pang ibang factors sa kailangang planchen eh. May take them 2 weeks or more to figure things out.
Tapos mamaya pag-uusapan din natin yung nurses. I recall
Ayun,
our earlier
Underboard.
episode. Tsaka yung our earlier discussion, di ba, with the EU Ambassador Luc Veron. Na daming mga nurses nagpupunta sa abroad, Europe among other places.
Yeah.
Some countries actually trying to raise their quotas of nurses from the Philippines. In the meantime, paano naman tayo?
Oo.
Di ba?
We're now left with the underboard.
Oo.
Di ba?
Hindi, pero
Napaka-ironic.
nga eh, parang...
Ironic, di ba? Parang we supply the world with registered nurses. and now we're, okay lang kami sa mga underboard.
But if I got it right from Ambassador Veron, he was also saying that, you know, ang kapalit din nito is we're also supporting the training of nurses para may constant supply.
Diba?
For them. Ayun nga
Nga lang eh. Hindi ko alam.
Sabi rin ni Ambassador, you know, in the end, it's a Philippine, these are Philippine decisions. It's up to you guys from your end. What to do.
Yeah, that's it. It's really
uuwi na naman
decision we have to make here.
doon sa mga sigurado pag-uusapan pa rin natin mamaya,
Correct.
'di ba? Sweldo, 'di ba? And what can our society, our government do for our people
Sabi
right
rin kasi
here?
nila, ang daming nurses na hindi nagtatrabaho. We
Yeah.
have an oversupply right now.
Actually, di ba, even during the time of COVID, di ba, parang hindi naman nila sinasabing
So,
kulang
can you blame them
talaga
if
sa
they go
nurse.
abroad?
Pero kulang yung mga nurse na gusto
Na
magtrabaho.
tumatanggap ng trabaho.
Di ba? Yun ang problema eh.
Anyway, ito yung mga bagay na pag-uusapan pa rin po natin. We'll be bringing in our first guest after a quick break. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs, and joining us now is Dr. Ron Jean Solante. He's an infectious diseases specialist and the president of the Philippine College of Physicians. And great to see you again, Doc Ron Jean, but we wish you were here in the flesh.
Hi, Doc.
Magandang gabi po.
Hi, Doc. Okay,
Hi,
Doc.
Lucy. Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, good news. Bivalent is now here. Bad news ba na commercially available, meaning magbabayad ang tao? Anong take nyo rito?
Well, this is part of the normalcy in terms of dealing with the pandemic, Ruchi, because that really was the plan. Then for us to be in terms of normal dealing with the infectious disease that is considered a long-term disease. No, even WHO considered that COVID will stay here with us for a longer period of time. Lifting the public health emergency because we are not already in the health emergency situation,
Right.
which covered also the importance of an EUA, why people are vaccinated in a span of time that to
Right.
get that what we call herd immunity. Then this is just a normal process. We have to deal with it, and it's up to the government now. How can we make this vaccine both available for those who cannot afford, and for those who can afford, we need to put the specific guidelines and where should we put this vaccine in the other context of other vaccine preventable diseases.
So ano to, does this fall now under the category, the same category as the measles vaccine, the polio vaccine, chickenpox, ano ba yun? Ganun ba yun?
Yes, Lucy, no, you're correct. Because if you read the WHO recommendation, when they lifted the public health emergency, they put there, when you put COVID vaccination, it should be part of the life course vaccination. Ano ba itong mga life course vaccination? Itong pneumococcal vaccine, influenza, no? MMR, meaning starting from children to adolescents, then to the elderly population and the other vulnerable population. This should now be part of the routine or what we call recommended vaccine.
Okay, now Doc, I gusto kong dumiretso doon sa, as you said, magkaka-access na yung mga tao, but pakilinaw lang yung mga senaryo dito. Diba? So kasi kanina sinabi rin ni Secretary Ted Herbosa, hindi naman ibig sabihin nito na sa bawat kanto ng drugstore mahahanap nyo na to. But so saan nga namin mahanap? Assuming nandito na people are interested in it, they feel they can afford it. Saan ako pupunta? Butika, certified butika, didiretso ba ako sa doktor ko? Pupunta ba ako sa barangay? Ano yung magiging senaryo dito?
Okay, so kung titingnan natin ngayon, no, let's just make this an example, no, yung pneumococcal and influenza vaccine, no, yung recommended vaccine sa mga may edad, no. Ang pathway dito is that one, you can access it through the hospital, kung saan yung mga doktor natin na nagbibigay ng mga bakuna or nagre-recommend ng mga bakuna. So ito yung pinaka-most logical way of delivering the vaccine. Kasi ganyan naman talaga ang method ng vaccination natin sa Pilipinas. Who gives the vaccine? These are the doctors, no? Pangalawa, it can also be in the workplaces. Ano ba itong mga workplaces? Kagaya ng mga companies ngayon, meron tayong tinatawag na mga company physicians, no? They also have what we call vaccination program that are being given to their employees that are vulnerable. Pangatlo, yung tinatawag natin na community-based vaccination program, and this is the local government. Alam naman natin, ang mga local government, meron din tayong mga bakuna dyan na naka-impact in terms of sa mga campaign ng mga different local government. So, pwede rin silang magbigay ng mga bakuna doon sa mga vulnerable population at their level. Ito siguro yung pwedeng meron sigurong bayad, meron din sigurong libre, but I think ang pinaka-importante nito, we have now a wider access of this vaccine to the point na even hospitals where most of this vulnerable population can have access and get the vaccine. But again, it's out of pocket na. Talagang magbabayad na sila.
Pero Doc, atras muna tayo ng konti. We're getting way ahead. What else has to be ironed out before the vaccines get here and are commercially available to the general public? I mean, I suppose itong FDA is parang ano pa lang parang okay, pwede na. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na dating na yan bukas.
Yes. Kasi ang application nito, no, if I would like to be specific with it. Ang na-approve ngayon, ito yung na-approve yung multi-dose vial. Yung multi-dose vial, sa isang vial, 4 or 5 ang pwedeng bakunahan, no? The challenge of a multi-dose vial is that pag bubuksan na yan, dapat meron kang 5 taong bibigyan. And halimbawa, kung ako yung doktor, ipunin ko muna yung 5 pasyente sa klinik ko bago ko ito buksan para at least magamit ko silang 5 pasyente. The other formulation of the vaccine na ginagamit natin kadalasan, no, kagaya ng pneumococcal or influenza, yung single dose vial. Yung single dose, pagbuksan mo, para lang doon sa isang tao. So ito yung mga dalawang kailangan nating alamin. Kung ano ba itong available. Is it the multi-dose or is it the single dose vial?
Okay, but are there other things as well? For example, saan pwede ito maging available? Sino lamang pwedeng makakuha? Is it going to be a prescription-based vaccine? And so on down the line. Mga ganun bagay.
Yes, ang ganyang mga bagay, kasama rin yan sa FDA. Pero actually, just like any drug, kailangan mo pa rin ng prescription yan. Kasi
Okay.
ang bakuna, ang magbibigay talaga niyan, ideally, no, nandun yan sa law natin, no, na ang bakuna ay ibibigay only through a healthcare worker, nurse or doctor. And just like any drug, kailangan ng prescription yan para may ibibigay doon sa mga intended population. Kasi even if that is commercially available, we need to monitor pa rin yung mga adverse events. At kasama yan doon sa rekomendasyon ng FDA na pag in-approve ka, meron kang capability to also monitor the adverse event ng mga ganitong klaseng bakuna.
Pero sir, timelines. I don't know if you're in the position to talk about timelines. More or less, how long will it take before this becomes commercially available in the Philippines?
I think I am not so privy about ang pinag-usapan ng FDA and Pfizer, no? Kasi ang alam ko sa ibang bansa, this has also been approved na, pero meron silang single dose vial, no? Ibig sabihin, yung isang vial, isang ano lang. So I don't know if it's available or approved, basta ang alam ko lang ang multi-dose vial. And there is already anytime naman pag merong mag-purchase niyan, ang mag-purchase niyan is through the company na, no? Yung mga halimbawa, hospital mag-purchase through Pfizer, and then Pfizer will tell them, okay, we will supply you with this vaccine. So I think anytime there are already talks on that na meron ng nagplano na mag-purchase ng bakuna.
Pero Doc, at tagal na natin pinag-uusapan tong bivalent vaccines. Sa tagal na pinag-uusapan natin, I'm just wondering, the latest data, the latest research that we now understand about the bivalent vaccines.
Okay. Now, ayaw ko lang ma-discourage ang mga tao, no, because there is also a new formulation now, the XBB specific formulation of vaccine. And ito yung mas meron siyang talagang XBB na formulation kumpara sa bivalent. The bivalent contained the B4, the B5, no? So it has some protection against the XBB. But in the latest WHO recommendation, in fact, ang gusto nilang mangyari na the pharmaceutical industry should really focus on formulating an XBB specific. No? But again, the bivalent vaccine has more advantage over the monovalent. So far, if I'm going to say this, if one should need a vaccine against COVID at this point in time, it's the bivalent that should be given, not anymore the monovalent. Diretso ka na doon kasi meron ka ng cross protection with XBB 0.1, 0.5, and the other XBB na medyo bumaba na ngayon ng konti.
What does that mean for those who only have the monovalent? I mean, when we travel, when we go places where there might be some danger beyond the mask, I mean, does the monovalent vaccine that we all got, most of us, have any effect at all even at this point?
Ganito, if you only receive the monovalent and you receive the 2 boosters of the monovalent, let's say, 4 na ang monovalent mo, you still have a very good protection against COVID, no? But you don't expect that protection will be longer. So, ibig sabihin, ang tricky kasi, Lucy, sa COVID virus is that if you are given the vaccine, 4 to 6 months, mag-uwi na ang immunity natin. Bababa talaga yung antibody level natin. And that's why when we did the recommendation for the next vaccine to be given as a 5th dose, especially for the healthcare workers and vulnerable population, dapat ang pagitan mo lang dyan from the last dose should be 4 to 6 months. So, halimbawa, you traveled and you don't have the bivalent vaccine and you only receive the monovalent vaccine. Pero yung monovalent vaccine mo, na-receive mo 2 or 3 months ago, medyo mayroon ka pang protection yan. No?
Otherwise-
Even with, otherwise, pag more than 6 months na yan, and then you need to sustain that antibody level, get the bivalent because it has a more broader, ang tawag nila dito, broader ang protection dahil because of the Omicron na kasama sa formulation.
Now, but you know, of course, that the acceptance of the vaccines, whether monovalent or this one, has always been quite low. How would you campaign for, the acceptance of the bivalent vaccine now that, the public will have to incur out-of-pocket expenses for it?
Yeah, that's the other side, no? Because when you will be giving this, basta as long as it is available and if it is out of pocket, then titingnan natin kung sino pa rin ba ang interesado. Meaning to say, yung interested at talagang yung pababakuna, they have to spend for that. No? Ibig sabihin, ganun kataas yung interest nila kasi nagpapabakuna. Now, for those who cannot afford and are vulnerable and want to get the vaccine, I think it's also proper that the government should have some flexibility to get this vaccine at the expense of the government. Kasi hindi basta-basta lang. Until now, we still see patients admitted because of COVID. At the same time, this is still an infection that we have to deal with, especially with vulnerable population, immunocompromised. So hindi natin pababayaan naman siguro kung yung mga hindi makaka-afford na gustong magpabakuna.
Hindi, pero dun sa mga hindi naman vulnerable, hindi naman immunocompromised, pero ayaw lang talaga ng bakuna na, are they putting themselves in danger or in any kind of risk by choosing not to be vaccinated further?
Yes, that's the area of vulnerability itong mga ganitong population. But again, kung i-quantify natin yung vulnerability for this population, it's really low compared to those who are elderly. Para lang maintindihan ng publiko, no? Right now we're recommending flu vaccine, no? Flu vaccine is recommended 6 months and older yan, no? Pero ano ba ang uptake ng flu vaccine natin? Ang baba ng uptake natin because it's quite expensive, no? And a lot of times nakikita naman ng mga tao, magpa-flu ako, sipon, ubo lang, sakit ng katawan. After that, okay naman ako.
Correct.
So that's why ganun ang mangyayari niyan. Ay, nagka-COVID naman ako, 2 days, 3 days nang ako inubo, nawala na. Okay naman ako. So I think that's the reason why that when we will be giving this vaccine, it should only be to the targeted population na mas mataas ang risk na mag-severe. It's not really for everyone or for the general population.
So hindi na siya threat.
It's not a threat for the general population. Yes, correct. I agree with that.
Doc, let me simplify that at risk of oversimplifying. But just to check kung tama yung pagkakaintindi ko. You're saying that itong bivalent, I basically treat it like the flu shots that I'm getting offered every year?
Yes, I think that will be the direction now because every time na merong mga bagong mutations, they will also reformulate the vaccine. And halimbawa, no, in some conventions that I have attended, ganun yung mga predictions nila. Like they will continue with the surveillance of the COVID and then they will look at the mutations. If there are mutations in that particular year that causes increase in the infection or surge of cases, then they will now reformulate the vaccine to allow hitting that mutated virus para hindi naman tumataas at makokontrol yung
maybe
endemic na ba to, Doc? Is that what this means? Endemic na?
Yes. It's already an endemic infection. There is still community transmission. Talagang mahirap sabihin kung kailan mag-end itong transmission na to.
But just to, maybe this might help to complete the picture you mentioned nga na, I mean, sa totoo lang, dinireport din naman natin pa rin that there are still people getting admitted for COVID every single day. What are we seeing in terms of the symptoms of people in hospital, both those who are fully vaccinated and even boosted versus those na hindi bakunado?
Alam mo, Robin, nakikita namin ngayon whether it's vaccinated, they are vaccinated or not vaccinated. magkapare-pareho na lang ang sintomas eh. Doon na lang nagkakatalo kung talagang matanda ka na. No? Ibig sabihin, you have 85 years old. I have seen a lot of that. 85 years old, minsan wala ngang ubo. Tulog na lang, nag-stroke na, nag-MI na, or an-atake sa puso. We do the test for COVID. May positive pala to. COVID pala to. Something like that na talagang it's so unpredictable, and we know who are the vulnerable, but for the general population, I would say this is something that we can deal with.
Sir, so let me see if I'm getting this right. Let me back up a bit. So are you saying therefore na those who are not in the vulnerable population, you don't have to get this? Tama
Yes.
ba?
Yes.
That is the simplest way of saying it. You don't have to get this.
Yes, yes.
At saka hindi matandang-matanda.
So ako yun.
Oh.
Hindi ka
Alam
naman
mo,
matandang-matanda.
yes,
Hindi talaga.
Sa US, okay, sa US, no? In fact, in other countries like UK, US, their bivalent vaccine has already been recommended as a second booster. Ibig sabihin, nakatanggap na ng for the primary, dalawang booster, another 2 booster for the bivalent, and doon nila ni-recommend sa 65. Kasi talagang wala nang nagpapabakuna sa kanila, but their hospitals are still seeing patients 60, 65 years old because of COVID and the comorbidities. No? So, ang ano nila dito is that we will protect only a segment of this population because ito naman yung nakikita natin. But for the general population, we don't have, wala naman tayong nakikita na admit because of COVID. So, let's focus on the vulnerable population.
Okay, but-
And I think that will also be the one that we will be recommending.
But even there, Doc, of course, we always have to keep asking for, and those sectors might be asking also, for the elderly and the vulnerable sectors, yung safety findings naman natin dito sa bivalent, is there anything that they need to understand? Is there a particular subsector pa within those sectors that need to know some things?
Well, in terms of the adverse event, no, it has been found out that it has the same adverse event as that with monovalent, no. And I think we have heard about may event before na nag-stroke. There was also event of myocarditis, but again, these are really few, and in fact, ang sabi nila, these are indirect related with the vaccine, and it has not something to do with totally with the vaccine.
Doc, I'm not sure about my facts. No, it might be just my memory lapse. But has the origin of this COVID been actually established? I mean, are we clear that this really began in Wuhan from the marketplace where there were, ano yung exotic seafood, or has that been established, or was this lab created, which was di ba, the subject of rumors at that time? I ask because I want to know whether we're still in the same level where a pandemic could come upon us and we will all be caught again by surprise.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Lucy, no? Because in any type of virus, hahanapin talaga natin kung saan ba ang origin nito.
Right.
Kagaya ng, I will say, no, yung pneumococcal, yung pneumonia, streptococcus pneumoniae, bakit hindi natin matupo-tupo? Because it stays in the nasopharynx of elderly population and children. So kaya every now and then talagang may pneumonia. Influenza, mayroon tayong mga carriers ng influenza like yung mga bird, no, or mga other animals that can also mutate and transmit it to the humans. With COVID virus, yes, they were able to isolate the parang blueprint nung virus na yon in some of these exotic animals doon sa Wuhan, but they are not certain kung talaga bang doon nag-originate or it's just coincidental na nagkaroon lang itong mga animals ito because it's being transferred from the human to animals or animals to human. So
Yun
it's
nga, Doc,
magulo pa, walang conclusion.
Exactly. So it's such a source of insecurity, di ba? Because if we've never been able to figure out how they actually were created, if that's even the word for it, no? How can we ever find a way to prevent future pandemics of this magnitude from happening?
Yeah, that's always the problem with the virus na because ang nature kasi talaga na itong mga respiratory viruses, there's always a reservoir kung saan siya nagagaling. And most of the time, animals yan, no? With MERS-CoV, SARS-CoV-1, nakita naman natin, may pinanggalingan. But this is the only time na talagang hindi pa nila nakikita kung saan talaga nanggagaling
Ayun
ito.
nga eh.
And that's precisely the reason why it's not ending. Because if we know that the source there is that particular animal, edi patayin mo lahat ng animals na yan, edi wala ng transmission. But it's not happening, no? Talagang there are people that are harboring this infection, yung mga vulnerable population, mutating inside their immune system and transferring it to another. So it's so complex. It's a complex virus that the first time we've ever see this type of virus.
And on that note, with the SONA coming up, and there's plans to build this virology center, how's that coming along as far as you're concerned? Are you seeing that movement beginning?
Well, at least we have the plan. Now, the next challenge is the execution and the implementation. We need to see that, because building a virology center is not only 1 year, 2 years. It's really a long-term plan. Even with that plan to manufacture vaccines, no? Talagang pinagplanuhan yan. Countries like, I just attended the Asian Dengue Summit, no? There are now countries like Thailand and Indonesia are already beginning to make their own vaccines, no, against some of these vaccine-preventable diseases. And it took them several years, several administrations to do it. So sana, we need to learn lessons from other countries when we look at projects like this na hindi ito pang isang administrasyon lang. It should be a continued process and para lang ma-build up natin ang momentum.
Okay. Maraming salamat po sa inyo, Dr. Ron Solante, aming suki. We're starting up another conversation right after this breather. Keep it here on The Chiefs.
We're on the second half of our discussion, and joining us now is Melvin Miranda, President of the Philippine Nurses Association. Good evening. Welcome to The Chiefs, Mr.
Good evening,
Miranda.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, good evening.
At saka magandang umaga po sa inyo. We understand you're attending an International Congress of Nurses dyan sa Canada.
Yes po.
Okay, maganda sigurong umpisahan doon. I'm just wondering, syempre, we have you here, we invited you so we can talk about yung sitwasyon natin dito sa Pilipinas. Na on the one hand, matagal na pinag-usapan, napaka-ironic. Ang daming mga nurses na walang trabaho, maraming ospital na sinasabi nila, wala kaming makuwang nurse. And yet at the same time, marami naman tayong mga nurse na nagpupunta sa abroad. Siguro, umpisahan ko dito. Yung sitwasyon po ba natin, lalo na kasama nyo dyan yung ibang mga counterparts, kakaiba ba po itong sitwasyon natin? Or is this something that all other countries, especially from the global south or the developing nations, can relate with?
Yes, sir. Actually, with our Congress here, most of the members of the International Council of Nurses have addressed also a shortage with concerns also similar or same in the Philippines, because the concern po is pertaining to their increasing aging population, and they lack merely concerns with the human resources for health in their countries.
Pero that said, just to give a point here, ano yung kakaiba sa sitwasyon natin sa kanila? If everybody we can relate to a shortage, nonetheless, kasi it's also driven by demand on their side, di ba? May shortage kasi the hospitals have a high demand, tayo rin naman, but mukhang pareho, pero ano yung pinagkaiba po ng
Parang
sitwasyon?
elderly sila. Marami silang mga elderly, di ba?
So, ano po yung kakaiba sa sitwasyon ng Philippine nurses?
In our situation, it's certainly on the economics, because they can offer lucrative salaries and compensations. But in the Philippines po, our concern is merely on the alignment of the supposedly salaries with the private and the public healthcare hospitals.
Right.
Because categorically, here in the Philippines, our profession, the healthcare workers, including the nurses, are in the category of non-agricultural So meaning some of our nurses in the provinces, most specifically in the private sector, they are being paid on the minimum salary wage.
Oo.
So these are the concerns which the private sector is doing. They may not be violating our salary grade because it's not stipulated in the provisions. It's only applicable for the public health hospitals. But because of our category as non-agricultural, they can have options to have salary wage.
Ako naman, diretso na ako dun sa issue na mainit ngayon, Mr. Miranda, no? As you know, there's a debate going on as to whether we should allow bar flunkers, not exam, not bar, board exam flunkers, to actually practice nursing in the DOH hospitals. And of course, the jury is still out on it, but what's your take?
Actually, DOH Secretary Herbosa mentioned this proposal merely because of the 4,000 plus to fill the plantilla positions. However, this option could be more relevant in a way to fill the 4,000 shortage natin for the vacant positions because we have just produced 10,764 newly registered nurses last May 2023. So if that is the case of the concern with the filling of the vacant positions for the 4,000 plus, why not consider this as a source of the human resources for health for nurses of these plantilla positions? But the gap is that of, ang concern natin is these job openings are not being published and being mapped accordingly kung saang mga hospitals ang open. So it's a matter of basic information dissemination to our nurses so that they could process their applications as well.
Pero communication lapse lang ba yan, Mr. Miranda? Kasi si Secretary Herbosa seems quite, di ba, certain and definite about this crying need and would really want to push it if, if the public allows, I mean, especially the nurses group, no? So, anong tingin mo dyan? Kasi mukhang desidido rin siya na itulak yan. So,
Yes.
it doesn't appear to me, at least, no, as just a problem of communication.
Yeah. Other than that, it's because the concern really of the problem with the shortage of nurses are in the provinces. Most ang bulk ng applications of nurses are here in Metro Manila. So that's why with the offers also of the private hospitals here in Metro Manila, the concern are most of the nurses in the provinces are going here. So really the problem is with the regions and the far-flung areas where
Okay.
supposedly nurses are working. So
Okay,
in that
so
regard,
if it's the region, so
Yes.
would you allow it? Yung mga flunkers, do you think that...
still no, because we are after also with their protection. Kasi the problem is it's not part of the provision of our law that we will allow the temporary license, specifically with the 70 to 74%. It's just indicated po in the provision of our Philippine Nursing Act of 2002 that those 75% can really perform the professional task. However, the option of having the 70 to 74% could be a burden po sa ating mga registered nurses in a way that since there's no specific scope of practice if it is stipulated in any law, so we don't have that. So that's why if they will commit errors, the burden is with the principal of the respondent superior. It's with the registered nurses who are supervising them or those administrators who have hired them in the institution.
So, but surely it's not just a legal matter, right? I mean, in practice, does that really mean anything that you got 74 and hence did not pass? In practice, I mean, isn't it reasonable also nga to assume na 74 naman just 1 point away from actually passing and being registered? Ano ba talaga? I mean, I'm talking about practice and not the law. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, on the basis of probably having discussions sa Professional Regulation Commission, if there will be a study and very evident po that those who have 70 to 74%, kung ibababa yung passing rate on that rating, and if it is justifiable through an evidence base that they have possessed already with confidence yung competencies in the performance of professional tasks, So I think that could be
Pwede.
considered.
Okay.
That could be considered. So siguro ang direct coordination talaga nito is the regulatory, which is the Professional Regulation Commission. But however, the PRC have the position na po, di ba po, na we cannot allow even a special permit. Kasi ang sabi, why not special permit for this temporary license? But it was adopted in the Medical Act. Pero yung special permit here, as stipulated in our law, is basically on those still on national emergency for registered nurses or for foreign nurses. So there is still a concern really on the possibility of the concerns and risk for temporary license for 70 to 74%.
Sir Melvin, I'd like to lay a clear baseline of things. Are we in effect saying that there is really no shortage of nurses? There is no shortage of nurses. There's actually a shortage of people who want to work as nurses.
Yes, actually, we really need to manage our data here in the Philippines because seemingly there is a gap between the numbers that we're talking about if we have shortage and we have the numbers supposedly that we have here in the Philippines. With the PRC, they claim that we have 905,000 nurses, registered nurses in the Philippines. And for 125,000, for 125,000 who are on active service, who are renewing their license. While the Department of Health is saying that we have 675,525. So these numbers are very important to say if we do have a shortage or we have an oversupply. When it comes to the oversupply, we really need to track those nurses who are not engaged in their work sa hospitals. Kasi we have also considered nurses who are attracted to work in BPOs. And that's a reality. When we reach those BPOs, most of their employees are nurses and registered nurses.
Oh, I see. So marami pero they're now in another job.
But to be clear, this is still related to their field of competency. Kumbaga nagagamit nila doon yung
Hindi,
this is
BPO nga
yeah, but it could be telemedicine. It could be
Yes.
I see.
It's on their accounts are more on the hospitals or on the medical companies. However, that's why most of the qualifications they are considering registered nurses. So in these BPOs, BPOs, ma'am, sirs, ang concern po natin is most of our graduates and most of our licensed nurses are attracted to BPO because seemingly they have invested in education eh. So most of our nurses really want to pay back to their parents yung mga na-invest nila in education. So mas na-attract talaga sila. And since hindi pa clear yung table natin on our offers for the salary of nurses, that's one thing that we really needed to discuss.
Malaki ba yung gap between what they get from the BPO companies and what they would otherwise get if they practiced nursing?
Yes. Actually, for the entry level, just for the salary grade 15, we have 33,600, which is for an entry level for the BPOs, it's doubled, almost 60,000 plus with other benefits pa. Whenever they will close an account or whenever there are some other additional packages that these BPOs are offering.
Sir Melvin, sorry, small detail lang. Were they aware of this gap when they decided to take up nursing? And how much does it cost to take up nursing versus to take up something that will get you a BPO job? I mean, I'm just trying to imagine the processes here.
Yeah, actually the trend goes like this. When they graduate and have the license, they just considered it as for the entry in the BPO to consider the concerns nila with the finances. And then after that, they will definitely consider application abroad. But one thing that is very important as a prerequisite to work abroad is to have to be in practice or presently in practice sa mga hospitals.
In hospitals.
So that's why the trend now is that of those who are registered nurses in the BPO will have their resignation, then they will have their practice in the hospitals just to comply with the requirement, then they apply. For deployment.
You mentioned doon sa BPOs, rini-require din nila, especially if this pertains to telemedicine and so on, rini-require nila na RN din yung kukunin nila. You mentioned that.
Yes.
Tama po ba yun?
Yes, because of the risk of the interpretation of some documents that are being cascaded to them. because it will really need professional expertise for the interpretation.
But does that mean also that your time as an registered nurse for a let's say a telemedicine BPO, I don't know, accredited yon to you as an RN? This is something that is certified as genuine experience that you can then take wherever you want to go, whether it's a private hospital here in the Philippines, or even a government hospital, or maybe even a public health track here in the Philippines, or of course going abroad.
Actually, that's one thing that is not clear in our system sa Philippines, yung credentialing and equivalency. Kaya that's why most of our nurses, even they are practicing as a registered nurse, and seemingly kasi yung kanilang function in the BPO are not recognized as a practice here in the Philippines. But in the United States, they recognize it as a practice. So dito sa Pilipinas, they are not considering and crediting it as a practice because we don't have any established provisions or guidelines that will recognize that this is part of our professional practice here.
So whether it's career track and career growth or plain salary, talo pa rin dito yung yung incentives for a young nurse.
Yes, exactly. Because of the disparity, as what I had mentioned, with the private sector and the public health facilities, almost half yung disparity. As I mentioned, with the Department of Labor and Employment, upon inspection, because of that of the minimum wage of the category, so 9,000 to 15,000 are in the private sector. And almost, as we mentioned, 33,000, the disparity is almost half, a 15,000 difference. So, ang problema natin sa public healthcare facilities, when a registered nurse applies, mahaba yung proseso. So, it will take time. So, ito yung mga opportunities na ang mga private hospitals are doing one-day hiring. And that one-day hiring, they will not anymore, they can't wait anymore for their processing sa mga public hospitals. So they will try first primarily in the private sector. But the problem is with the salary.
And pabalik-balik naman tayo talaga doon sa salary. But now we have a few more numbers to play around with. I'm curious doon sa alam natin kasi nabanggit nyo from 33 almost double sa BPOs. If we're talking about just trying to address a genuine shortage, an objective shortage of nurses, for example, sa public hospitals, sa iba-ibang probinsya natin, and so on, and even private hospitals, does the data suggest a threshold where parang, okay, it's not 33,000 obviously, 60,000, but dumoble na yun, tumataas na yun.
Yeah.
But meron ba tayong nakikitang threshold na if we hit this level, mukhang we can hold on to our nurses?
Yes, sir. Actually, we are in roundtable discussion with the UP Law Center, and we are working on the discussion pertaining to Magna Carta for healthcare workers for private and public healthcare sector. One is very evident in most of the studies. As what we have mentioned, the average salaries of the Filipino nurses among the Southeast Asian nation is 40,000, which we are second as lowest in the salary. So eventually, if we consider or hit the 50,000 salary of nurses, which is proposed by the Filipino Nurses United in their bill, we strongly support that this could be considered because this could be probably the salary that could be amenable to those nurses who have their families.
What about the option of actually putting a quota on the number of nurses that we should be sending, which has been done before, no?
Yes,
but
exactly.
how do you guys feel about that? Because there is now a suggestion from the health secretary to create a national nursing advisory in order to prevent the outflow of nurses. How do you feel about that? Even that, let's just suggestion to do that, no?
Yeah. Actually, when the POEA, now the Department of Migrant Workers, have implemented this in 2020, our position before is we are not in favor because of the concern when it comes to deprivation of our professional nurses to be outside the country and explore in the professional opportunities. However, with the proposal of Secretary Herbosa, our concern here is pertaining on the creation of the Nursing Advisory Council has been the outcome of our dialogue with him. Okay. It was June 20 when the PNA and other nursing leaders have discussed this to him. because the Nursing Advisory Council may focus its function to basically analyze data and gather important facts that will be very substantial for the recommendation for these problems and issues. So before talaga we are really pushing to have National Chief Nursing Officer because with the 73% cadres of the allied health here in the Philippines, implementation of universal health care talaga ang nurses will be the one that has been considered to maximize in the implementation towards the grassroots. So that's why malaki talagang importance. Probably other professions may react on this na why only an advisory council for nurses. It's because we are appealing to this matter because the implementation of universal healthcare is really significant for the welfare and protection of our nurses. So we are in favor and we are in support, and this has been the outcomes of our dialogue with him.
But what it means is it's going to be a policy that will dictate it instead of market forces, no? In other words, 'di ba, kung mataas ang demand and there's available funds, 'di ba, dapat naman ganon. So you're willing to be
Yes.
subject to a group that will determine whether or not, you're allowed to go out of the country and seek higher wages or not. Okay kayo doon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, it's a recommendatory body. The recommendatory by which, for example, if we have the nursing bill that are pending for amendment way back 20 years ago, so we'll try to seek this pending nursing bills in the Senate and the House of Representatives. What is more relevant in such a way to prevent the exodus of our nurses? So we will look into the matter on what could be the major factor of the exodus. If it is salaries and compensation, what is the problem? And one of the findings that we have is because of the concern with, since we have the implementation of salary grade 15, it's not fully implemented. We have a problem with the devolution in the local government units, wherein they have the autonomy to allocate budget for the manpower. So that's why we have still salary grade 11 for nurses in the local government units and the provincial offices or hospitals. So I think this concern could be the Nursing Advisory Council can have a collective efforts and joint agency collaboration so that we could see the whole picture of what is happening in the grassroots.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Melvin Miranda, President
Thank
of
you.
the Philippine Nurses Association. Sir, maraming salamat po
Thank you,
sa inyo.
sir.
Thank you.
And that's it for the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.